Hi, my name is Erica Zimmerman, and I will be giving you a brief presentation on the existential philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre. Right here, I have a brief little rundown of my agenda, the topics that I'll be covering in my PowerPoint. So, moving right along, the reason I picked Sartre was he was one of the first philosophers that I learned about outside of academia. Nobody told me to read Sartre. Nobody assigned it to me as a homework assignment or a report. I was just in a place in my life where I was a very angsty teenager and I was upset about the status quo and I didn't believe in God and just very angry all the time. And a friend of mine recommended that I read Being in Nothingness. So I went up to Barnes and Noble and I purchased this book, and it just completely changed my perspective on a lot of things. And it deeply resonated with me in a lot of areas because I was atheist at the time. I did not believe in social constructs. The status quo was upsetting to me. Everything that this guy talked about just hit the nail on the head with what I was feeling and dealing with. And so that's why I picked Sartre to do my report about. A little historical background on Sartre was he was drafted into the French army from 1939 to 1941. He was also captured as a prisoner of war in 1940 and imprisoned for 9 months. Another thing that happened to him after that was in the 1960s, he met with Fidel Castro and Che Guevara, two very prominent socialists at the time. And in 1964, he was awarded the Nobel Prize for his literary contribution to the world. And then in 1968, he was arrested for participating in a protest. He was charged with civil disobedience and shortly thereafter was pardoned by the president of France, which he later stated on TV, "You don't imprison Voltaire." As far as Sartre's personal life goes, he was born on June 21st in 1905. He was raised by his mother and grandparents because his father, a naval sea captain, died when he was 2 years old. He was very close to his mother as a result and remained close to her up until she remarried when he was 12 years old. And of course, he was very upset about this because the close bond that he shared with his mother was altered after his stepfather came into the picture. Another thing to note about him was he always wore thick glasses. He suffered from wandering eye. He was very short. He was only 5'3", and he considered himself to be very unattractive. But he made up for it in other ways, like he had a really good sense of humor. In grad school, he was known as the college's fiercest prankster in the entire history of that college. And another fun thing that happened to him at college is he met his lifelong companion, Simone de Beauvoir, in grad school. They had an open relationship and were non-monogamous for the entirety of their time together. She was a noted existential philosopher and feminist, and they really connected on an intellectual level, even though they didn't marry, because in true existentialist fashion, they didn't believe in the social constructs of marriage. There's a lot of things that made Sartre influential, but for brevity's sake, I'm just going to touch on three quick topics. So he was one of the leading French philosophers of the 21st century. His influence reached lots of different disciplines, but most notably the discipline of sociology, literary studies, and civil critical theory. Sartre was also a household name since 1960, and he made philosophy and deep thinking pretty glamorous. As far as the philosophies that we've studied in this class, I believe that the Sartrean existential philosophy most aligns with postmodernism. The reason I think that is because while I was looking over postmodernism, there was a couple of key concepts that stood out to me as very Sartrean. And an example of one of those concepts is they both believed that people are the ones who form the rules about society, and that social constructs are not fixed but very changeable. What Sartre believed was that we are burdened by our freedom. Every choice we make reveals what we think human beings should be, and that we live in anguish because we are condemned to this life freedom. Um, he also was a proponent of not living in bad faith. His definition of living in bad faith is believing that you need to stay in a situation that makes you very unhappy due to social norms or social constructs or somebody telling you something. He believed that because we are beings of ultimate and pure freedom, that we can choose whatever situation we want. If we're in a relationship and we're very unhappy in that relationship, we don't have to be in that relationship. If we're living in a certain place that makes us unhappy, we don't need to live there. And that's what he meant by living in bad faith. It's basically somebody closing their eyes and saying, nope, this is the only choice. I hate it and I don't want to do it, but I have no other options. You always have options. There was no God, there's no human nature, there is no design for what human beings are supposed to be, was another thing that Sartre believed. And his main theme was existence precedes essence. So, in other words, I create myself through what I do. Some fun facts about Sartre is that in 1964, after he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for his literary contributions, he declined this prestigious award, and he is one out of two people in the history of the Nobel Peace Prize who have ever done that. Another thing that I found interesting was he was a heavy chain smoker, and he was also an amphetamine abuser, which may have contributed to his early death. But another thing that methamphetamines are known for is causing hallucinations and altered perceptions and paranoia. So I can't help but wonder if the substances that he was on maybe influenced his philosophy in a lot of ways. Thank you for watching. I'm all done now. These are my references, and I hope you had fun watching my presentation.